One of the really important things inside Flash CS3 ActionScript 3.0 is using the trace command, and I'll show you how you would need to do this and why you would need to do this. Well, what you can do is you've got the ability to trace a command and to check to see whether that line of code is working. Now you're probably thinking, well, why on earth would we need to do that? You'll see in later stages, if you're writing pages and pages of code, what happens is that sometimes Flash does not give you the correct error in the output panel, and what will happen is that will kind of enable some other parts of the code not to work properly. And it's very important that we have some sort of facility or some way of checking whether the code that we've written is actually correct, and programmers use this called trace statement, so we can trace the statement. So what I'm going to do is show you how we can do this. So we can just type in trace, open bracket, and we need to trace our variable name. So in this case will be user name. Now at this point what we need to do is we need to remember that this is case sensitive. So if we now typed in this will give us an inaccurate reading of tracing that statement. So remember, that's very crucial. Remember that ActionScript 3.0 is case sensitive. Okay, so let's have a look at that. Now if I press Ctrl and Enter to test my movie, we'll see my variable name being stored in my output box. That's quite cool. So what Flash is actually telling us that we've got an empty container and we've got a data type which is a string stored in that variable. So it's Savraj that's stored in that variable. So that's quite cool. Another thing we could also do is just to check whether this code is working, we can say something like you notice that we've got an error opened up here. That is because that is not a valid username, a valid variable name that we've got in there, and you'll notice that we've got one error. So if I go ahead and close that and close that, however, if I put this in speech marks, we'll see that because that's a string type, that's now come out as a valid output. So that's quite cool. That's another way of checking if our trace is actually working properly as well. So that's quite cool. So there's two different examples of using trace properly, and we'll be using trace when we're writing out code, and you'll probably use trace if you're writing out doing work on a website, or you're doing and trying to develop a game. I know my students will need to use trace quite a bit. So there we have it, trace statement.